Welcome back. If you're joining us for the first time, this series explores core insights from mid-20th century sociology, particularly systems thinking and the structural functionalist tradition. These ideas were central to sociology in the mid-20th century, and our goal is to bring them back into the conversation as an essential perspective that helps explain how order is maintained, how groups adapt, and how pressure for change can be utilized for stability. Each episode is just a starting point, an introduction that scratches the surface. The goal is to spark your curiosity and invite you to explore the foundations of the discipline more deeply. In our first episode, we introduced systems thinking about society, the idea that societies, or any group, are composed of interconnected parts, each interrelated, each playing a role in maintaining the larger whole. Those systems are also embedded in other systems. Then, in episode 2, we explored the recursive relationship between structure and agency, and why intentions don't always line up with systems outcomes. Today, we turn to a specific type of social structure, culture. Culture is not just a set of customs or tastes. It's a specific type of social structure. Like all structures, it shapes and constrains and enables the behavior of people within their groups and communities, often without full awareness. It's usually easiest to notice a group's culture when it's not our own. Like when we travel to another country, read historical texts, or observe a new religious tradition. But a person's or group's own culture tends to blend into the background, unless something goes wrong or change is forced. That's why we need tools to help us see culture clearly, including our own, maybe especially if we like it. It's not only about cultural change that we might want to learn. It's especially about preserving cultures that we cherish. And the schema we introduced in this episode is useful, especially at the micro level, in our local communities and families. In this episode, you'll see how we break down a culture into 4 component parts and see how they interact, sustain, and change with each other. For anyone navigating communities or traditions, parents, educators, leaders, or just thoughtful people, understanding how culture works is essential. Let's begin. To make sense of how mid-century thinkers approached culture, it helps to briefly revisit a few figures just outside that era, people whose ideas either shaped or later complicated mid-century approaches in meaningful ways. First, of course, Émile Durkheim, a French sociologist who is widely recognized as one of the founders of sociology. His work is foundational to understanding how culture functions as social glue. In the elementary forms of religious life, Durkheim argued that collective rituals and symbols reinforce group cohesion and help maintain moral order. He introduced the idea of social facts. For Durkheim, culture, especially through religion and ritual, was not a sideshow, but a central mechanism of social integration. Next, Max Weber. Like Durkheim, Weber's legacy carried forward into mid-century sociology, especially in the United States, where scholars like Merton and Parsons drew on his insights. Weber helps us trace the cultural roots of action, connecting values to institutional structures, a core interest of mid-century theorists. Next, an anthropologist, Clifford Geertz. Though not a sociologist by training, Geertz's work helped reframe culture as meaning-making. In his influential book, The Interpretation of Cultures, Geertz described culture as a web of meaning. He argued that to understand culture, we must look not only at behavior, but at the meanings people assign to that behavior as well. This perspective is crucial for understanding rituals, gestures, and practices within a variety of groups. Finally, it's worth acknowledging the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, which draws on the work of two American linguists, Edward Sapir and Benjamin Lee Whorf. Their key writings suggest that the language we speak shapes how we perceive the world. This idea has been extended and critiqued in many directions, but the basic insight that symbolic tools like language influence cognition and perception remains central to the sociology of culture. Let's define culture more precisely. In sociology, culture can be understood as the patterns and materials of thinking and behaving that are shared, learned, and passed across generations. These include both the symbolic and the material or tangible dimensions of life. To help us make sense of this, we can use a 2x2 framework that categorizes culture into those four interrelated components: patterns of thinking, materials of thinking, patterns of behavior, and materials of behavior. Let's walk through this. Patterns of thinking. These are the intangible, untouchable elements, values, beliefs, ideologies, and assumptions that are particular to a group or an entire society. Examples are things like a belief in responsible individualism or a shared value around punctuality. In some societies, punctuality is seen as a moral duty, and in others, flexibility and timekeeping may be interpreted as warmth and attentiveness to human relationships. Take some time and choose a micro-level culture with which you're familiar. It could be an extended family, a team at work, a small group. What are the beliefs that are prominent? Can you detect any ideologies, organized systems of ideas that justify or explain why things are the way they are? Assumptions that are taken for granted that shape perception? Is there a specialized understanding or knowledge that is particular to this group that other groups may not possess? Materials of thinking. These are the symbolic tools that help us think, like language, classification systems, and even metaphors. Again, consider how we speak about time. English speakers often treat time as a commodity. We spend it, waste it, and save it. Other languages frame time differently as cycles or flows. These metaphors can shape how we organize our lives. Next, patterns of behavior. These are routines, norms, that is, regular patterns of behavior that are shared. For example, greeting others with a handshake, bowing, kissing on the cheek. Whether people remove their shoes before entering a house. These practices can feel automatic, but they are culturally shaped. Take a moment and think about that microculture that you're familiar with. What are the common patterns of behavior? It could be something like coming into work and grabbing that first cup of coffee. Maybe everyone takes a break at 11. These are routines, norms, and customs. Finally, materials of behavior. These are the physical tools, physical spaces, and especially technologies that structure behavior. For example, open plan offices, school uniforms, or playgrounds. These four components are interdependent. They support, constrain, and enable one another in complex ways. Let's say a workplace installs new project management technologies. We'll call that a material of behavior. This is going to shift patterns of behavior. Perhaps people now update each other asynchronously instead of in a face-to-face meeting all at once. This change might encourage a new pattern of thinking. For example, that constant availability via a quick text message or electronic communication is unnecessary. And over time, new materials of thinking arise, like written norms or emojis signaling a certain tone in that new way of communication. When all four cultural elements align, culture is so embedded that we rarely notice it. It becomes background noise until something shifts. Durkheim's idea of social facts, the taken for granted practices that shape our thinking and behaving, helps us make sense of this. When these cultural components get out of sync, we might experience cultural lag, a concept introduced by sociologist William Fielding Ogburn. Typically, material culture, like tools or technologies, evolve more rapidly than non-material culture, like norms or values. This mismatch can cause friction, confusion, or backlash. History is full of examples of new technologies developing before we have customs or laws or a set of morality to deal with that. Sometimes old habits linger even after the environment changes. This is sometimes called cultural inertia. For example, a school may replace chalkboards with smartboards, but continue teaching as if it were still using chalk and erasers. Even the best tools can fail to reshape behavior or thinking if other cultural components haven't caught up. This is systems thinking in action. Culture is not static. It flexes, reforms, and sometimes fractures, but it does so systemically. One small change, a new vocabulary, a technology, can initiate a cascade. So try applying this framework to a setting you know well, a book club, a workplace, a classroom. What values seem to govern it? What tools or spaces make certain behaviors easier? Which customs feel natural? When you start noticing these elements, you're no longer just participating in culture, you're analyzing it. Now imagine a change in one of these components. How might that ripple through and affect other aspects of that culture? So culture is not just about meaning and customs. It's about patterns and tools. And those patterns and tools that shape how we behave and how we respond to change. Let's bring all of this into a familiar, real-world setting. Imagine a mid-sized design and marketing firm called Brightline Creative. For years, Brightline thrived on in-person collaboration. The office had a lively, open floor plan. Coworkers would swing by each other's desks to brainstorm some ideas, grab coffee together to talk through challenges, or gather around a whiteboard to sketch out campaigns. Junior staff learned by overhearing how senior staff handled clients. There was a buzz, a rhythm, a shared sense of flow in the workplace. Then came the change. The company expanded and moved into a sleek new building. This new space had more private offices, soundproof pods, and quiet zones to reduce distractions. At the same time, Brightline adopted a sophisticated project management platform that allowed teams to track progress asynchronously and reduce the need for meetings. From a leadership standpoint, this all made sense. The goal was better focus, clearer documentation, and less time wasted in meetings. But within weeks, something fell off. The energy dropped. New hires felt disconnected. Creative collaboration slowed. Team leads noticed fewer spontaneous ideas, and morale surveys reflected a dip in enthusiasm. One employee described the new space as technically efficient but emotionally flat. Marla, one of the senior project managers, decided to dig deeper. She realized the change wasn't just about the office layer or software. It was about culture, specifically the firm's materials of behavior. Physical space and tech tools had changed dramatically, but its patterns of behavior, open collaboration, casual mentorship, hadn't been able to adapt. And the old patterns of thinking, that creativity thrives on organic interaction, were still in place. The cultural system was out of sync. Marla took action not by scrapping the changes, but by tweaking the culture deliberately. First, she started a weekly half-hour meeting called Off Script. There was no agenda, just space for people to share thoughts, side projects, funny ads, design ideas. Participation was optional, but quickly became popular. Second, she repurposed the project's platform's chat feature. To create an informal channel for humor, inspiration, and life updates. People shared weekend plans, posted memes, or asked for book recommendations. Over time, these small interventions helped realign the system. The materials of behavior remained in place. The office design and software didn't change again. But now, new patterns of behavior emerged that reinforced the firm's old strengths: openness, trust, and creative synergy. New routines and rituals emerged, like team-created casual check-ins. And crucially, this didn't happen by accident. Marla's choices reflected systems thinking. She understood that culture is not just about morale or mission statements. It's a dynamic web of beliefs, behaviors, and tools. The story also illustrates how change often starts with disruption. Something stops working, tension appears, and only then do people begin to reflect on what was previously taken for granted. Like we discussed earlier, cultural stability often masks itself. We only notice it when a piece slips out of place and we're faced with the need to restabilize. To wrap up, here are a few questions to help you reflect on the cultural concepts we've explored in this episode. Number 1, how did the ideas in this episode build on or contrast with concepts from episode 1 and 2? Consider systems thinking, unintended consequences, and the structure-agency dynamic. Number 2, can you recall a time when your own behavior or someone else's felt shaped more by cultural expectations than by deliberate, conscious choice? What cultural patterns or tools were at play? Did you recognize the influence in the moment or only in hindsight? Number 3, again, think of a specific group you know well, a workplace, sports team, family, or community organization. What's something about the culture of that group that you'd like to change or preserve? Which quadrant would you focus on first? Patterns of thinking, materials of thinking, patterns of behavior, or materials of behavior, and why? Looking at a current problem or debate in society, how might the 4-part framework help us analyze what's happening? These questions are meant not just to prompt discussion, but to help you practice seeing culture as a system, something that's patterned, adaptable, and sometimes fragile. Thanks for exploring these ideas with me. In our next episode, we'll shift from culture to institutions, how they stabilize norms across generations and embed values into the structure of daily life.